All right, I started the stream. Um, just gonna wait until people have start acknowledging that they can see the stuff that's going on. Stream up. All right, so can everybody hear me okay? And also, if I do this, can you hear this, the piano? Those are the two most important things to hear. Cool. All right, so welcome everybody to the first time I've ever kind of opened up my music screen. You may be wondering what the heck you're looking at, and I'll explain that in a little bit. But for now, I'll just explain. So this is our first music stream, and basically I just want to take you through a work in progress that I've been doing, and kind of explain sort of the process and how it's coming along, and show some different things. Either, just because you are interested in it, or because you actually want to try your hand at it, and kind of want to see how other people do it, because that can always be really helpful. So a few preliminary notes. This is an experiment. We've never done this before, so we're not quite sure what the structure should be, or things might go a little wonky or whatever. So if you notice anything, please just leave that in the chat. Running the stream software and my music software at the same time takes up a ton of CPU. Sometimes it even says it's 100%. So hopefully everything works okay. And please let me know if I need to adjust any levels, if the music's too quiet or too loud, or if I am compared to it or whatever along the way. If you have any questions related to the Kickstarter, please mention Handelabra Games. So at Handelabra Games in your post or your chat message. If you have anything specific to me or musical related, please mention me at Jean-Marc. And because I won't be able to read everything that's in the chat all the time, but I will take note of anything that it has a mention at me in it, because it highlights it. Also, we could only get mono sound for this. I'm not sure whose fault it is. I think it might be Game Show's, but basically it would only take in the left channel. And so I actually made the music into mono specifically so that otherwise you would only get the left channel's worth of audio information, and you might lose some stuff. So I just made it into mono so that it won't sound quite as good as stereo, but it'll do for this. All right, so the first thing I'd like to talk about is a little bit about the musical process I take when doing Sentinels of the Multiverse. So as most of you know, and if you don't, I'll let you know, most of the music I do for Sentinels is for the environment decks and the villain decks. Each environment gets its own theme, usually between 5 and 6 minutes of music, sometimes a little longer. And basically it's supposed to set an atmosphere. And then the other one is the villain's theme, and those are much shorter, usually 40 seconds to a minute. And those are supposed to be the theme of that villain, and particularly that they won the game. So they're kind of, it's supposed to be both sinister and celebratory, but sort of for them and not for you. So for each piece of music, I discussed the direction of it with the team, Handelabra, and also with Greater Than Games. Usually, there are sort of a few keyword descriptions that I'll get from Greater Than Games. Like maybe some culture or some other character that they referenced when they made that character or that environment or whatever. And then maybe some loose musical references, like, oh, listen to this thing or listen to that thing. But usually it's nothing overly specific. The keywords are just that, keywords to kind of help me narrow it down a bit. And the references, I usually listen to them. Sometimes I try and match the style, like I did with Enclave of the Endlings, and sometimes I just kind of disregard it. For example, with Insula Primalis, the obvious example was Jurassic Park. I listened to it and kind of decided that it wasn't really the kind of direction I'd like to go in with Insula Primalis, so I did something different. So once I have all those, and I usually try and get those at the beginning of a expansion, I spend some time letting those ideas float around my head a little bit, so that usually by the time I get started on the music, I have a general feel in mind for what it should sound like. I usually don't have an exact melody or anything, but I do kind of have my mind is usually in the right spot for the kind of music that I'll be making, so that when I sit down to do it, I can eliminate a lot of possibilities really quickly. And eliminating what you don't want is very useful, almost as useful as knowing exactly what you do want. So the way I approach it when I actually create it is different between the environment and the villain. So when I do the environment, I usually don't do any kind of sketch work. And I'll show you what I mean by sketch work in a little bit. I usually go more for the sound or the feel of sound rather than a specific melody or rhythm. So for example, in Insula Primalis again, I used a lot of drums. Like I just wanted kind of that almost tribal, prehistoric feel to it. Or for, the Final Wasteland, for example, it would be desolate, and then there would be action scenes, and then it would sort of get a bit ambient again. And that's sort of more the idea is what's the general soundscape like for those environments. And it generally takes me about 10 to 20 hours to do one environment piece, depending on the complexity of it. So, you can imagine that a piece like Time Cataclysm took a while as well, because it's 17 minutes long. Now, for the villains, on the other hand, I often do a sketch. So I will be showing you kind of what I mean by that for this one. And I tend to focus more on the melody and bring that more to the forefront. Especially if you're doing a very short piece, having some sort of recognizable melody to associate with the character becomes more important in my mind. So that, if you ever want to reference that character in some other way, you can just play a motif or whatever, and then all of a sudden it's like, aha, it's that character. So a recent example of that is in the Doc Thorath Capital. I referenced Grand Warlord Voss, and that's sort of that was sort of the important bit there. And so a villain theme generally takes me between 2 to 6 hours. And a lot of that time is just spent deciding what that melody is going to be, because that can be very important, and a good melody that makes sense for the character can make a huge difference. And once that theme is done, that's what represents them. So I want to make sure it works well. And then the rest of the time is choosing different instruments and stuff like that. So that might seem like a lot of time, and it is, but that's just sort of what it takes to kind of shape everything. And part of it is that I actually don't have that much experience doing music this way. I used to compose just sort of pen and paper and then give it to the musicians, and then they would play their thing. And so actually composing kind of virtual instruments and all that is newer for me, and maybe the time it takes me will shorten as time goes on. But so now I'll talk about some of the main inspirations I have for this kind of stuff. So obviously Saturday morning cartoons and animated movies. Growing up, I watched a lot of Disney in particular. My favorite Disney movie was Aladdin and The Lion King. I'd watched Rescue Rangers, Darkwing Duck, DuckTales, that kind of thing, Winnie the Pooh. And I liked Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, as I think every every kid in the late 80s or early 90s did. I also inspired by a lot of old video game music, so Mario, Zelda, Mega Man, and the Ninja Turtles games, Bucky O'Hare, which a lot of people are just discovering, but I've always liked the music from that game. Donkey Kong Country, Final Fantasy series, Metal Gear Solid, Parappa the Rapper. Sort of a lot of the big ones because, indie games weren't a huge thing back in the day. I could draw a lot of inspiration from hymns, like old church music, especially in the meter and harmonies. They follow a lot of the strong structures and have a lot of interesting ways of moving from one to another. And I think that's part of the reason that they're still sung today. And also a cappella music, so like the Nylons, who are Canadian. And then later on, I got more into like progressive rock, symphonic rock, funk, disco. Tended to be, older styles of rock. I never really got into punk, grunge, metal, that kind of thing. Or modern pop nearly as much. And then a lot of like orchestral and classical stuff, particularly Tchaikovsky, who did the Nutcracker, and Debussy, who you'd recognize from Clair de Lune. So like that song that plays at the end of Ocean's 11 movie, for example. All right, so that's enough about that. I'm just going to do a quick check here. I don't see any questions that at me, so I will move on. So what are you looking at here? So this is a DAW, a digital audio workstation, and there are many of those out there. One of the most common ones, because Apple's made it available easily, is GarageBand. So you might have messed around with that, and it's very similar. And there are other big ones like Cubase and Pro Tools, but they all sort of work on a similar principle. So basically, music flows from left to right. It starts here, and then when you hit play, this little tracker kind of goes along, and any music, sound, or MIDI or audio information that it passes by, it will output. And that's the general way in which most of these things work, and it's pretty logical, I think. And this particular one I started using, it's honorware, which means that you can try it out with no limitations whatsoever, and I'll just bring this up here. You can try it out with no limitations whatsoever, and then after 30 days, there's a thing at the start that says, please buy it if you want to continue to use it. That's kind of like WinRAR or something like that. You can purchase it after that, or but I started using it particularly because it did let you try it out quite a bit before, and it has a lot of powerful, more programmery features. You can customize your own buttons. Like all of these are just things that I use all the time, so I made little buttons for them. They don't look very nice from a UI standpoint because they're just kind of like rund position, but they're meaningful to me, so I use them. Um, and then, so once I'm in here, I can enter music just by playing on this little keyboard. You can't see it, but I have one, and it's hooked in. I have a full-size one, but unfortunately my desk setup doesn't allow me to kind of put it in on the desk in any kind of ergonomical way. So I also have a smaller one for quick input. And yeah, basically, like it has 2 octaves on it. I might upgrade to 3 at some point because sometimes that can be live, in case anyone is interested in that. And yeah, basically it just lets me quickly input into this. Now, I'll show you what that looks like. So I'll just record something quick here, just something nonsense, just so you can see sort of what it looks like after it's recorded. Key 25, in case anyone is interested in that. And yeah, basically it just lets me quickly input into this. Now, I'll show you what that looks like. So I'll just record something quick here, just something nonsense, just so you can see sort of what it looks like after it's recorded. Okay, so you'll notice that when I hit record, it starts putting in something that it just looks like a bunch of squares and rectangles sort of in a box. And if I open that up, you can actually see exactly what I recorded here. And so from the moment I hit record, it came this far, and then I started playing during the second bar here, and the first thing I played was a C. And then the 17 represents how hard I hit it. So in this case, I didn't hit it very hard. In this case, I hit it at 80, and it goes up to 127. And so this is when I started playing the note on the left-hand side, and this is when I stopped playing the note on the right-hand side. And this is really helpful because if I made a mistake, for example, if I wanted this one, if I hit this one too high, I can just move the note down, and then that kind of corrects that mistake. Or if I, meant to hit this right on the second bar here, I can just kind of move this over. So this is really kind of helpful because it allows you to modify things that you've already recorded much better than recording audio does. If you record audio, it can be a lot trickier to make modifications like this without any degradation of audio quality. So yeah, this is generally what it looks like. You can set all kinds of different parameters. There's different channels you can have, so that if you want to record 2 things on the same line but they're playing different instruments, you can do that. And then you can view these are the velocity levels here, so you can get a quick glance. Like this one was too quiet, so I'll just raise that one up, raise this one up, so then if I played a note too quiet, now that can make it as loud as I need it to be. You can have expression, so that's when the volume of the note changes over time. So for example, like going like that might fade that one out. So yeah, and this is basically just the general MIDI information here. And then I actually set the instruments here in the effects tab. And you'll notice right now I just have this piano module. This is just like a really, really cheap general MIDI kind of piano sound. It's free and it takes up almost no CPU. If you're interested in that, you can check it out here. And so basically everything I've shown you so far is something that is, you could just have up and running today without spending a dime. Um, and I actually prefer to use the cheap sort of dinky stuff first when I'm doing a sketch. And I'll show you why and what that is right now. So I will just get rid of this. And so this is a parent track, and hidden in here I have all the stuff I've been working on so far for Wager Master. Some of these can actually go up to like, 60, 80 tracks or whatever. But for Wager Master, I actually kept it to a modest amount. And so first thing I did, coming up with the music here, is decide what the melody was going to be. And so I'll get to that in a second. So the first thing I wanted to do was have sort of a swing feel to it. So if, for example, I turn on the metronome and I just hit record here, here's what it sounds like. And let me know if you guys heard that okay. But basically it's just a metronome, and it's just doing a tick on every beat. And then every bar, it's a little bit higher. So it's like, it's a little bit lower. So it's like, do, 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 do. And that just keeps the beat so that when you're playing something, it kind of matches up. Like if I play something just freestyle, it might not match up with everything else that I'm doing, and then you end up with a big old mess. So it's nice to have a metronome of some sort. The thing is that I really wanted this to have kind of an upbeat swing style. Why? Well, let me show you. So this is Wager Master here. And Wager Master is like this odd little alien guy that thrives on playing tricks on the rules of reality. So he kind of finds the champions of a particular area of the multiverse, and then pits them in kind of these little games he has that kind of alter reality, and you can kind of see that in the mechanics of his deck. And so he has a lot of win and lose conditions in his cards, and he kind of messes with the players a little bit. For example, switching around the phase order or the turn order even. And so he's kind of twisted, but he's kind of like trying to have fun. And so I decided, so the keywords I got from Christopher for him were, and Adam, were game show, fun house, weird, wacky, those kinds of things. And so I listened to a lot of game show music, and there was actually a lot of variety in the style. Most people know, say, the Jeopardy or Price is Right theme, but there's actually a lot of different ones. There's like country, hillbilly, there's funk, it just whatever the flavor of the day was, I guess. And so I decided to go with sort of an upbeat big band style that would have both a fun and wacky element, but also sound a bit weird and off at certain points. So basically, because I wanted to go for sort of a swingy big band feel, I didn't feel that this tuk 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 was very helpful in establishing that. So what I like to do instead sometimes is make my own sort of metronome that's more in the style of what I'll actually be doing, and that basically means I do the drums first. So if I click here on effects, you'll see that there are just a ton of them. And I actually don't know what a lot of these do. That's sort of what, learning the program along the way is helpful for us, because there's just so many of these things, and they can all do so many different things. Of course, you can narrow it down to favorites here. So I'll just load up Contact. And this is a pretty popular interface for different instruments. And I'll go into swing here, and then so this allows me to select which instruments I'd like to use. And I'll just load up jazz drums here. And so you can see a little interface that kind of gives you a few hints as to what goes on. So these are breaks. If I just press this, you can hear it kind of gives like a certain drum sting of sorts. Whereas over here, it's individual instruments. So different parts of the drums are assigned to different keys here. And if I use my keyboard, works a little bit better. It's just a lot easier to kind of play them on the keyboard than it is clicking on things, especially because, you know, if you want two things at once, you can do that on a keyboard, but you can't really do that on a mouse. And so what I'll do with this is just kind of like replace the metronome with something more in the style of what I'm trying to do. So in this case, it would be more like this. You know, kind of so so yeah, I'll bring this up because I've already done all this. And get rid of that. And this is basically the same as what I just showed you, but it's just complete here. And so here's what that sounds like. And that's like a fairly standard jazz swing kind of beat. You know, nothing too crazy going on there. But, you know, there are some sections that require that I do something a little bit special. And so, for example, in the intro, I have something a little bit different. And this will make a little bit more sense once you hear everything else. But I'll just play that for you by itself so you can hear what it sounds like. And so when I select, oh yeah, one thing is when I select an area, it'll loop that area as long as this is on. And that's really helpful for different reasons, you know, hearing something over and over again, recording over top of it and trying multiple times, different ideas, things like that. So yeah, so those are the drums there, and that kind of gives me, you know, a better metronome to work with, because it's a lot more fun playing to this than it would be to just play to tick took 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 tick took took took. So then the next thing I do is just take that dinky piano sound and try out some different melodies. And again, because I find the melody is really important in villain themes, you know, I'll try out a bunch of different ideas and see what works. And I usually end up taking one or two of them actually, just in different sections. So, you know, one idea is really good and you know, works really well. And so I'll put that in section A, and then another one works really well and I'll put that in section B. As long as they, you know, kind of flow and have the same style to it. And that's sort of what having this drum style kind of helps me do, is make sure that they're in somewhat of a similar style. So I'll just move this melody up. And a melody usually just has one part, so there's nothing else playing with it. And the melody is also sort of the part you would sing. It's the part you kind of like, if you were asked to sing a particular song, because you can only humans for the most part are monophonic, meaning they can only produce one sound out of their mouth at a time. That's usually the part most people will sing. So here's what that sounds like. And you can hear how this interacts with the drum a little bit more in the beginning here too. I'll turn off the loop point so you can hear the whole thing. So as you can hear there, like it really tries to, it follows along with the rhythm and stuff like that. But it also has like these awkward intervals and things like that. It goes out of the scale quite a bit, so meaning it uses a lot of chromatics. And in case you're not familiar with what that means here, I'll just play you a scale here. And chromatics just means that it plays notes that don't belong in that scale. So I'll play a few of those. So you can hear a few notes in there that sound a little bit out of place. And chromaticism is pretty common in jazz, but I used it more in the making for a more awkward sound than usual. And I can load that up in case anyone's interested in looking a bit more at the melody. And I set a swing beat to this, and the difference between a regular beat and a swing beat is that rather than going like tut 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 tut, it's more like tut 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 tut. So one of them has the first beat always has more space in time. It has more of a value to it than the second one. So like 2/3 and then 1/3 kind of thing. And so like anything, because it's in the key of C, anything with a sharp next to it right here means that it's out of the key. So these two are in the key, that one's out, that one's out, that one's out. This one is in, this one is in, that one's out. And then these ones are in again. And then so here, like this one's in, that one's out, that one's in, that one's out, that one's out, that one's in. And that kind of gives it that kind of more awkward jazzy feel. And yeah, that's pretty much it. And again, so you might be asking like, well, why do I use this dinky piano? Surely I can find a better piano sound than this. This sounds like general MIDI. Whereas I have some that sound like, a real pianist on a stage or something like that. And the reason is because, well, one is it doesn't use up much CPU, so it helps me just to kind of get my ideas out there, not really worry about CPU. But that's not too big of an issue. The bigger thing is that is sort of a philosophy that if it sounds good with the low quality stuff, it'll sound better with the high quality stuff. And a lot of people mix in mono specifically for that reason. Generally, if it sounds good in mono, it'll sound better in stereo. And so this helps me to kind of focus on, is this a good melody? Does this work? Rather than, does this sound like a high quality piece of music, but the and less emphasis on the melody. So usually when I do a sketch, I do it with the sort of the cheapest stuff that I can. And this is what I mean by a sketch, is just kind of like the bare bones outline of what something's going to sound like, and I can build it from there. So after I have the melody, the next thing I often do, or well, I usually do both at the same time, but record them separately, is the bass. And the bass is the lowest end, and that kind of provides a foundation for the music. So, and then you can see here there's a bit of an interplay between at the beginning here. So the melody will play and the bass will interject, and then the melody will play and the bass will interject, and then they both kind of go at the same time here, and then the bass leads into the next part. Sorry, here's what the bass sounds like just by itself. Sorry about that. I was talking, and part of the awkwardness of the way we have it set up is that I'm actually speaking through a track in this DAW. So when I solo this, it goes away. Anyway, I think you can hear me now. So what I was saying is, you'll notice that here, the bass line has a lot of big jumps in it, and that's pretty common in bass. And in jazz, like this is going doop 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 doop. That's pretty common in jazzy big band stuff. It's also common in like Arabian music. Like if you slow it down, doop 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 doop, or at least what we think of as Arabian music. Aladdin uses that. And then, so it has these big leaps, and then as a sort of a fill, it does this chromatic movement here. So it's just moving small steps up and down with a few breaks here for more rhythmic interest. Yeah, so if I play these two together, here's what it sounds like. I'm just going to keep that on solo so that you can always hear me here. And again, you can kind of hear sort of that like playful awkwardness between the two parts. And it's actually emphasized even more because, you know, there are certain notes that in the bass that somewhat clash with the melody intentionally in a way that makes it sound, you know, like they're hitting a wrong note or something like that. But that kind of in my opinion, that kind of adds to this kind of kooky character that we're trying to express. And so I won't play the whole thing, but if we play it with the drums, it's sounding like this. Oh yeah, and I just noticed that there's this extra note here that doesn't belong. I don't know why that's there, so I'm gonna delete it. Yeah, so now we have the melody, the bass, and the drums, and this is sort of like what I consider the foundation of a character theme, especially. But even most music, like a lot of music only really needs the melody, the bass, and the drums to sound kind of whole and complete. But the of course, like it still sounds a little hollow in the middle, and that's because we don't have any harmony there. So I will replace that with this one. Can just get rid of that. And so now, this is after I've added some of the harmonies in, and the harmonies can again enhance sort of the quality of awkwardness or whatever. And so, for example, I'll play this intro, and I can actually slow it down here so you can hear the sort of that awkwardness a little bit more. So this is with all the harmonies, just the intro. And then sped up to full speed. And if you want to take a look at the notes here, this is what it's looking at. You'll notice different colors here for the different harmonies underneath. And basically that means it's on another channel. And the reason I do that is because if I want different instruments playing different parts, each instrument needs to know which part it's going to play. If one is playing the melody, it plays the red part. If one is playing the inner harmony, it plays the yellow part. If one is playing the lower harmony, it plays the green part. Stuff like that. So then here's what this section sounds like with all of that stuff together. Yeah, so now I have what I consider a solid sketch. Like, this represents the entire idea without all the bells and whistles of all these different instruments and stuff like that. So at this point, I'd be like, okay, I'm ready to, start doing more with it. So the first thing I did here, let's see, let me take a look at my notes. Okay, so the first thing I do here is this upright bass. Upright bass is super common in jazz, and I'll just play a little bit for you here. And that's that was just me playing on the keyboard there. That wasn't actually in the song. But basically, the upright bass is just going to play what I was playing in the piano bass. Now, if I open up the instrument here, what you'll see here is that it's telling me like I can play long notes if I have the mod wheel down. Whoops, that wasn't. All right, just a sec. So here it's showing you the velocity. It's showing you how hard I'm hitting the note. So if I just barely press it, you can see it's down here. And it says a normal pluck. If I press it really hard, it's up here and it says slap pluck. And you can kind of hear that slap in it. You can kind of hear that percussive element of the string actually hitting the instrument. And that's actually a desirable thing because it has that, it can enhance the rhythm. And I'll show you how I did that. I see a mention here. I'm just going to take a look in the chat here. Yeah, I'll read over the chat once I'm done too, because I'm sure there's a lot I'm missing, and I'm sorry for that. But I'm just trying to get through everything. So here, you can see all I did was just take what was here and move it down here. And these green icons here just means it's a copy, a ghost copy. So if I make a change to the piano, it'll change it in this as well. Because especially in the bass, you don't want the bass instruments to be playing something different. When you're that low in the range, if the notes aren't the same, it can sound really muddy and not at all in a good way. You really have to be trying to go for a deliberate effect if you're going to have low notes that are clashing with each other. So what you'll notice here is I have this note 103. Now if I move it up and down, there's no slap. But if I move it all the way to the top, that's the slap. So basically what I wanted to do was have all the slaps on the off notes. So this one's not a slap. This one is. That one's not. That one is. The idea being that it actually adds to that percussive effect. So it's like do-ka, 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 do-ka. So if I play that just by itself for you right now, here's what that sounds like. And so you can kind of hear how that emphasizes the rhythmic element to it a little bit. And I actually decided to keep the original sketch piano in here. And this is something I did for Wagermaster I don't often do, is I'm actually going to keep the piano sketch in it. Most of the time I either mute the piano sketch or I just delete it completely if I don't need it anymore. But in this case, I think the piano really adds to it. So I'm actually going to keep it. So if I have these two at the same time, it sounds like this. You'll notice, one thing you might notice here is at the end here I have this effect. Like this goes, it's going down, and then all of a sudden it jumps way up here. Why does it do that? Well, if you look here, these are the normal notes it plays in the blue area, but then these yellow notes are all effects. And so those are kind of fun to play with, and I might actually add a few more of those if I find something that makes sense to me. Yeah, so what I did here is it goes do 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 do. So that sounds like this. And that kind of adds a bit to the comedy sound of it, because that's the only note that's playing at that particular part, so you should be able to hear it. And then this actually, so here, I actually don't want it in that one. So so now the piano and that can play together. And then in this section it sounds like this. And that's the general feel for the bass there. So let's see. I'm just taking a look at my notes. So the next thing I wanted to do is sort of emphasize the melody, and that's something that I think is really important, at least in the kind of music that I do for villain themes, is emphasizing the melody. You can still hear it in here for sure. But I didn't want it to be just the piano. I wanted to also have other instruments. And so that's where the saxophones come into play. So I'll bring these guys up here. And I'll show you what I loaded in. This is also swing. You'll notice I used a lot of swing instruments for this one, which I also used a lot in Enclave of the Endlings, but different ones for different ways. And so this is what the saxophone sounds like, just me on the keyboard. Hold on. And again, you'll notice the velocity is sensitive, so it'll play a different kind of sample based on how hard you hit it. Also, you can use the mod wheel for different effects like falls, and I'll just show you what those sound like. Or sforzando crescendos. And you probably recognize that kind of thing from Enclave of the Endlings. But for this, I'm just going to use the marcato here. And so I have the short one loaded up there and the long one loaded up here. And the reason I did that was because if you play a long note, sometimes it lacks the attack of the short note. And so I actually wanted both short and long at the same time. And because this is velocity based and not channel based, it was easiest for me to just make two different tracks here, one for long and one for short. So if I play those together, it sounds like this. And so those are emphasizing the melody. Do do do, like that's playing the melody right there. And sometimes to emphasize it even more, what I'll do is actually have the same instrument playing the same thing but an octave higher. So in that case it sounds like this. And that's pretty high. But, whatever. That's fine. Especially for this because it's supposed to sound a little janky in some ways. So altogether, those sound like this. And you'll notice that the high notes don't play these long sounds. And I did that because of a plan I have for this particular area, and I didn't want sort of these high notes to overtake it. So if I play that with all the other stuff here, it's starting to sound like this. And now we've really, kind of got the basic groove going there. And so all I wanted was something to kind of emphasize the inner harmonies here. The piano's playing it right now, but most pieces of music have something playing the harmony in some sort of rhythm, often like a rhythm guitar or something like that. And in this case, I decided to use a jazz organ. And it doesn't have a whole lot going on in it, but it does kind of add a little bit of hidden flavor in it. And these are the things that if you're listening to the song might not be quite as obvious, but are in there to kind of enhance the subtleties of it. So it sounds like this. So that's a little bit quieter and more subtle than the rest of it, but it does kind of add to the overall sound of it. So if I play those together, see if you can kind of pick that out a little bit. So you can especially hear it sort of here. And yeah, if you can't hear it, that's fine, because it's supposed to blend in with everything else. It's not supposed to stand out. And those are the kinds of things you kind of do to just kind of bring a bit more wholeness to the sound without adding any additional much complexity to it. So let's see, what are we going to look at next? Okay, so that is the melody for this area. Now for this other section, I could have kept going with the saxophones, but I decided I'd move on to something else. And so what I did was I actually brought in some harmonicas. And this was sort of a surprise to me. I was just kind of messing around with different sounds, and then I said, you know what? I think this is going to work. So I'll just show you what that looks like here. So John asks, how long would this live stream be if you were making this song from scratch? It would take a lot longer, because then I'd have to record all these parts rather than just move them in. Of course, part of the reason that it's taking as long as it is because I'm explaining a lot of stuff. I'm not just doing it. So if I cut down on the explanations, it would shorten it. But I think explanations are a big part of why we're doing this. So so we've got this kind of harmonica sound here. That's the long one. And then if we play it really hard, we get just a short sound. And again, we can do it. We can have either normal sound like this, or a vibrato sound like this. And you'll see I just moved the mod wheel up here. And I thought, oh well, I definitely have to make use of that vibrato sound in some sort of interesting way. So again, I loaded up two of them, one for short and one for long, because that just sort of works better with these instruments. Just a sec. I have to remember to solo this thing. So we have the harmonica short going like this. And we have the long one going like this. Particular sound here, this sound. The harmonica actually has a swell here. If you And then if you're curious about this particular sound here, this sound, the harmonica actually has a swell here if you hit just the right velocity. And so I probably didn't hit the right velocity and just had to adjust it in the MIDI. But yeah, you can kind of see it here. It was like 37 or something like that. So I just brought the velocity down to that. And because the swell actually increased in volume more than I wanted, I'm just showing you a little bit about the guts here. So I took the volume controller and just kind of brought it down this way, and that kind of counteracted how loud this got. And then I brought it up back immediately because I didn't want it to affect the rest of it. And you can just see I did a similar thing here. And so together with everything else, that sounds like this. And again, so again, up here, I made it go up high, which is kind of like, it starting to sound kind of tinny and dry up there, and thin, but again, because we're doing Wager Master here, I thought that actually added to the effect. And speaking of effects, I thought that this whole thing sounded just a bit too much like a regular harmonica here. And I wanted to add a bit more wackiness to it. So what I did was I added a chorus here, and I adjusted some effects. And it says vibrato, but it's kind of an extreme vibrato. I actually called it Wager Master vibrato. And that actually, if I add that, it goes from sounding like this to sounding like this. And so as you can see, it sounds a bit more like kind of wonky and out of tune. Forgive that. But basically, like, I put a really big depth on it and a really fast rate. So basically, it's like shifting the pitch up and down really quickly along the way, and that gives it an even more weird, awkward feel to it. And then let's see. So then I started adding a bit more decoration to this. So first one I'll add here is the trumpets. And I got them to play this beginning part. So you'll remember the beginning sounds like this. So I wanted to save the saxes for here and the harmonicas for here. So I decided to just have some trumpets going on at the beginning here. And unlike all the others we've seen so far, this one I used East-West. And it's sort of like one of the big name orchestral things. And I just loaded in their mute trumpets, staccato. And, you know, they're not as known for like the swing stuff. They're much more known for the big orchestral stuff, which I use in a lot of other pieces of music. But this is the first time I've used it here. And that sounds like this. That's basically playing the same chords that I have here. And again, you'll notice like adding those trumpets makes it sound a lot bigger and, you know, and gives it a lot more weight than just this piano. And again, that's because the piano is just sort of a dinky thing and the trumpets are enhancing it. And again, that's why I start off with sort of at the low end of things at the beginning. But again, I didn't really just want this straight trumpet sound. And so I added this thing called odd verb to it. And that's actually Absinthe. This synthesizer is really, really wonky to use. But thankfully it has a lot of really good presets. So I just loaded one called Oddverb, and I'm feeding the trumpets into this Oddverb here, and this is what that sounds like. And I'll actually bring down the trumpet sound so you can hear just the Oddverb, and then I'll mix them together. So that is like super, super weird. But you can't really even tell what it's playing at that point. So that's why I sort of mix these two together. I have the trumpets and the Oddverb blended together, and it sounds like this. And that's like wonky, but it still has that. I'm still keeping the trumpets in there for clarity. And so you'll notice there I added this little part in as sort of a decoration to fill in this space. And then I felt like it could use a bit more, even more clarity. So then I brought in some percussion. And this one's kind of fun because I used a thing called a mellotron. Now, without looking it up, without going to Google or anything, does anybody know what a mellotron is? I'll wait for the response on that. Since there's a bit of a delay between what I say and the Twitch stream. Megatron. Close. A mellotron. An early synth, isn't it? Yeah, that's pretty close. So basically, it's one of the first samplers. Basically, they recorded different instruments and put them on tapes and assigned each tape to a different note. And then whenever you played that note, it would play that tape. As you can imagine, like that required a lot of maintenance and stuff because you know how tapes have this tendency of getting just jumbled or mixed up, or and it could only go up to 8 seconds because that was sort of the longest they could have it at the time. So I'll just play some of these for you. And yeah, so it was used a lot in like the 60s by like the Rolling Stones and the Beatles, and then in the 70s by a lot of prog rock bands like Yes. And that's where I'm more familiar with it. Anyway, so I decided to load up a xylophone sound in a mellotron, because then it would sound a little bit different than, you know, a usual. You know, it sounds more like almost more like a kid's toy or something like that. And that's sort of, I thought that would be more fun in this case. And right now, I might add it to more later, but right now I just have it kind of doubling this trumpet part here. So I'll let you hear what that sounds like. Could you hear that in there? It brings a bit more definition to this part and, you know, makes it sound almost even more playful than before. And then finally, I have this thing, adverb here, because just like I was adding adverb to the trumpets, I also tried it out with a few other things, and I kind of liked the adverb going from the piano to that, just to hear what it would sound like. And what you're seeing here is just this is called rooting. Basically, it's saying like, okay, any audio information you get here, send it to this track, so I can choose which track. And if this is kind of dark, it's just I messed up on the theme somewhere, and anyway, it looks really dark right now. But so send it to adverb, and so without adverb, it sounds like this. I'll turn off everything else. Just so you can hear that. And this. But with the adverb, it sounds like this. You know, it sounds a little more wonky down in the low end, and especially here, I think you can hear it even better. Turn it up a bit just so you can hear. Now that's obviously way too loud, so I'll turn it back down, but I just wanted you to kind of hear how that adds a bit of warbliness to it, and it blends in better with the song, I find. So yeah, I guess that's about it as far as I've done so far. I'm still going to do a little bit more work on this. It's not done. Part of the things I'd like to add are some sound effects here, like game showy sound effects, buzzers, dingers, kind of things like that. And then probably here at the end, right where it ends really abruptly, like da-da-da-da, I'll probably add in sort of a percussion fill there before it loops back to the start. So the whole thing sounds like this. And yeah, also you'll notice like this section sounds a little bit more full than this section, so I'll probably add a little bit more to this one. But it is nearing completion overall. Let's see. I think I've covered everything now. So after this, you know, it would kind of be mixing and mastering. Mixing is like balancing everything together and finding space and applying EQ to it. And mastering is kind of the final step. I don't even do the mastering. I hand it off to somebody else to do. A guy named Galen Conroy, he does all the mastering for Sentinels of the Multiverse. And basically that just like takes the final track and applies the final EQ and compression and raises the volume and stuff so that it matches everything else in the game. All right. So I think that's about covers everything I was going to say today. Do we have questions? I'll just play this quietly in the background to fill up the space. So we announced today that we're going to do listening parties for all the music that we've already done. Sort of the idea behind that is we never really got a chance to explain much about them. They just were kind of released with the game, and that was that. So this will be part of the mini pack series of listening parties. So we're playing mini pack 1, mini pack 2, and then the final music for this, including Wager Master and Alright, see some questions coming in. What is your favorite villain? What was your favorite villain theme to compose? Oh man, they were all a lot of fun, but I think I had the most fun with misinformation. I had a kind of a specific idea of the sort of sound it would have. The first half being kind of like prim and proper, and then the second half being kind of like a more twisted. Can't hear me? Oh. Sorry, everybody. Sorry. Yeah, if I turn this down, it turned everything down, so. All right, I'm going to restart. So, question, what was your favorite villain theme to compose? That's a tough question because, they all have their fun elements to it. But I would say the most fun was misinformation. I had a very kind of specific idea of what the first part would sound like, all proper and prim and everything. And then the second half would be like after she flips and she's revealed that she's really a villain and all that. And so I really liked kind of recording all the sound effects and whatnot and putting those in there. And I actually got my wife Solveig to record herself making different sounds like sipping coffee and going ahem and all that stuff. We were playing with staplers and ruffling papers and using the printer and stuff like that. And so, like, I think it was a lot of fun because that was so far the only one I've worked on in sort of at the same time in the same room with someone else, and it was my wife of all people. So that was a lot of fun to do. Let's see. The Dread Dormammu asks, is there an environment or villain you'd be most excited to compose for in Season 2? Let me think a little bit about those. So as far as the villains are concerned, because most of Season 2 is team villains, we're going to actually do those a little bit differently. But we will be doing the environments similar to how it's been done before. I think Madame Madamere's will be kind of fun. Sort of a carnival kind of atmosphere to it. And actually there were some ideas I had for Wager Master's theme that I thought actually sounded more carnival-y, and I thought I'd kind of save those and put them aside until we're doing that. I'm also really looking forward to Freedom Tower, because I think it'll be one of the... I'm also looking for... Am I better now, the volume? I also am looking forward to Freedom Tower, because, it's one of the more hero-focused environments. Most of them are just kind of their own thing, and that happens to be where the battle's taking place. But Freedom Tower, I think, will be really interesting because it'll probably be the most sort of soaring and uplifting. It'll be kind of like a mixture of Megalopolis and the Sentinels theme, I think. Really emphasizing that, this is the headquarters of the heroes kind of thing. So I'm looking forward to doing that. Let's see what else. Thirdanguis, sorry if I mispronounced that, asks, how did you decide which tracks to mix together in Time Cataclysm? Like, what made you pick Silver Gulch and what Wagner Mars Bass to mix into the same section of the song? Yeah, so that's a good question. So originally when I was thinking of Time Cataclysm, I was like, oh, I'll take all the environment music and mix it together in some sort of crazy thing. But then in experimenting, I realized that that was a bit too ambitious. Not all the songs mixed very well, and it was just hard to kind of match everything up in a reasonable way. So then it kind of switched to this idea of just kind of mixing 2, maybe 3 environments together, and that worked way better. As far as the exact pairings, I always really liked the idea of mixing Silver Gulch and Mars Bass because they're 2 like completely different pieces, 2 different areas, 2 different times. One is presumably in the future in space, and then the other one is already in the past, and has more of a country western feel to it. And so I thought like bringing those 2 together is almost a must, and I tried it and I was like, oh yeah, this is really going to work. As far as Ruins of Atlantis and Tomb of Anubis, they both had kind of a similar feel to them already, in different ways, in sort of their exoticness, and they were both in a similar time signature. So when I put them together, I found that like they were blending really, really well. Rook City and Insula Primalis actually came from looking at Jennifer's artwork. When she was making the artwork and mixing the different environments together, one of them, she had like the Triceratops on the roof of the building, and I thought that was really cool, and so I was looking forward to kind of seeing how those would mix together. And then Megalopolis and Pike Industrial was kind of like, Megalopolis had these different parts where it left some space, so it was like do 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 do, and right there at the end it has some space for something to fill in, and for whatever reason the Pike Industrial like bump bump bottle boy came to mind, and so that sort of spawned that. And then in the soundtrack version there was like basically the leftovers. So I put like Final Wasteland, Realm of Discord, Mobile Defense Platform, and what was the other one? The other one all together. And that one was trickier because it was mixing 4 of them. Speedy Olrak, can we get a version 2 of the theme song for the waiting lobby? I want to change every once in a while. I want to change every once. So I'm guessing you mean like a different version of the theme song, for like the multiplayer area. Yeah, so I mean, you've been hearing the season 2 version of the theme song, and we've been kind of deciding like what we're going to do with that other than just use it in the trailer. So one idea was to have it in the game somehow, somewhere. We didn't want it to overtake the Sentinels theme song, but there might be a way that we can put it in some sort of sensible way. So that's something we're still discussing and figuring out. Thurdenga says, will we get an extended mix of Time Cataclysm once Season 2 is over with all of the environments? So Time Cataclysm is actually, it already covers all the environments that are in the card art. And that was sort of the intention. If you look at the card art, each one of them is from one or two or maybe more environments. And the intention of the music was to mix all of the environments represented by that deck together. And we've actually already done that. All the environments, all the other Season 2 environments aren't in that deck. So there's really no need to go back and change it. Also, because we've already released the soundtrack, the soundtrack kind of finalizes that, because otherwise, you have to hunt down everybody who already bought the soundtrack and be like, oh, look, there's an updated version now. So we'll probably just leave it as it is. Okay, so that looks like all the questions that are here. So yeah, thanks everybody for coming and checking out the stream. And I hope you enjoyed it and learned a thing or two. And I'm glad you guys all got the first chance to listen to Wager Master's theme, or at least a work in progress of it. And you can kind of hear how like it changes over time. So if I had given you the first pass of it, it would have just been the sketch with the piano or whatever, and then the next one would have been with a few added instruments and so on until it sounds like the way it is now. Oh, John S., how do you choose the colors for your tracks? So right now it's sort of arbitrary because I move them out, but I don't know. I actually have like this auto color thing. Where is that here? And I can set like, if it's named this, give it this color, for example. So keys have this and vocals have this. I didn't pick the colors particularly for any reason. It's just sort of like what it is, but I actually don't have folder tracks here, but if I did, I would put everything, like that. And then so basically whatever I name this, all its child tracks get the same color. But I usually just do this because it helps me identify one element from another. My percussion's always purple, so if I'm looking for percussion, it's quicker to find it. Just look at the purple. Saxophones are yellow, brass in general, so the trumpets are as well. Piano's orange. I just sort of arbitrarily decided those, and I've gotten used to them. The bass is dark blue. Okay, actually, there are a few more questions coming in. So Otaku Dash says, considering how far you've come in making all these tracks for Sentinels, is there any track looking back now that you feel you can do better, improve on it somehow? I probably could, but I think it's sort of an artist's crutch to kind of, I don't know if crutch is the right word, but a tendency of artists to kind of like criticize their own work or say like, oh, I didn't do that well, or I didn't do this well. And I've definitely had that at certain points. But once I've handed it in, once like it's like, okay, this is a finished song, it's done now, I've handed it in, it's in the game, it's on the soundtrack. I try to kind of consider that to be like a done, finished product that is the best it's going to be, because it's the best it could be at the time I made it. And I try not to worry too much about like, 2 years later I listen back and it's like, oh, this could have been improved, that could have been improved, because I think that's not really helpful in moving forward to kind of criticize your old work. It's just sort of like, it is what it is at this point, and I'll take anything I've learned along the way and apply it going forward, but I'm not too worried about any mistakes or improvements or whatever that could be made to the older tracks. Can we see what Time Cataclysm looks like in the DAW? It'd take a while to load. I don't know that my CPU can handle it right now, actually, because Time Cataclysm, like, I just loaded everything in, and it's just like a beast. And I actually had to like separate it into different projects and render those, and then stitch them all together because it was just such a monster to put together. But I can assure you, it looks quite crazy. You know, like if I showed you everything, it would probably be everything you see here times like 10 or 20 or something. I don't know exactly, but it's a pretty big monster. What's it like being both a programmer and composer? Do the different skills help or transfer? Yeah, so honestly, they feel completely different. You know, when I'm in programmer mode, so to speak, it feels more like I'm, you know, solving puzzles and things like that. Very sort of, am I left brain, right brain? I get the two confused. It feels like I'm using one part of my brain a little bit more than the other. You know, I get a little bit less, I guess, emotional about it, and, you know, sort of like it's clear what I need to do. I have some ideas of how to do it, and then I can sit down and kind of type until you know the expected results are achieved in a, you know, well-written way, maintainable way. Also, because John is also a fantastic programmer, I can bounce any ideas I have off of him, and he can help me out and let me know if I'm on the right track or not. But when it comes to music, I don't always know what needs to be done. You know, there's like an infinite amount of possibilities as to what could actually occur, and trying to like chop it down and come up with ideas is sort of just a process in and of itself. Like, do I do this? Do I do that? Do I use these instruments? And really, it's just like, you know, a difference of eliminating things I don't want and then trying to find things I do. And, you know, I tend to get a little bit more emotional about it. Sometimes I get really upset and like will leave and go for a walk or whatever because nothing's coming out. You know, like I mean, I calm down pretty quickly, but you know, it does feel very different in that it's like I don't know what to do this time, or I'm not sure, or I can't get this sound to be the way I want it, and I'm not sure how to do it because there's no logical way to explain to myself what I want. It's just like I just want a certain sound and it's not there, and I'm not really sure what to do about it. Yeah, so somebody's mentioning like chip tunes and programmer. Yeah, so there is definitely a lot more overlap there. I have the program called Famitracker here. Let's see if I can load that up. There we go. This is what Famitracker looks like. And yeah, I do kind of feel a bit more like a programmer when I'm using this because, you know, the music looks more like a spreadsheet or something. Yeah, I don't know if I have any examples to bring up here. This one, no. But yeah, it looks more like a spreadsheet, and you kind of put the notes in here, and it kind of goes down here. And I mean, even this is an improvement over what they had before. You know, before it was like assembly and stuff like that. So you know, back in those days, it was really a lot. It took a lot more technical work to be able to compose, and doing electronic digital music has come a long way since then. All right, so yeah, I think I'll actually wrap this up now. So thank you very much, everybody, for coming out and checking it out, and I hope this was helpful to you, and I look forward to seeing you guys around the Kickstarter. Please continue to spread the love about it online, although I'm sure most of you already have, as much as you can. It looks like we're well on our way to reaching our goal, and I look forward to seeing you guys all around. I guess I'll play this one more time before I head out.